Well, let's get started. Let's get this claimed first. This is the NAL Talking Circle for June. And we're just getting it at the end of June. So we're getting it in before June starts, and then we'll have our next one in July. But let's get started.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
Okay, now that we've been disclaimed, we're just going to go over our agenda. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the Native Indian Education Study that just came out in May, and we're really going to focus on looking at some data they have regarding Native languages and across various states within the United States. And then we're going to have some really great and important program updates from Jennifer. And then at the end, we'll just sort of wrap up by talking about upcoming events and next steps. And so I think Jennifer, hi Jennifer.
Hi. Hi everybody. I think that I know all of you, but I would love to know you even better. So just quickly introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Leo. I'm the program officer for the Native American Language Program, and we've been working with all of you on first getting through your APRs and then working through any changes and any help that anybody needs. So I am here. I am ready to work with you. So just
awesome.
Drop me a line.
Awesome. And we kind of have a small group. And again, this is the talking circle. So I just want to encourage you can go off mute and talk, ask questions. We're going to be doing a lot of discussion when it comes to the data. If any of you were able to attend the data-driven decision-making, we're going to be going through one part of the process as we look at this data coming out of the study. If you don't know, I'm Oleni. I work with the OIE Technical Assistance Team, and I'll be facilitating us through our talking circle. So what is the Native Indian Education Study? I think we have a poll here that will be popping up regarding whether or not you've seen the study. It was released in May, and really the purpose is to look at education within the Native American community and Alaskan Indians. So let's take a look at the poll. Have you seen? Oh, so some of you have, and some of you who haven't want to plan to do that. And I really want to encourage you when you're looking at this data to actually go and take a look at it, because it offers some really interesting insights. We also have our second poll. If you have maybe looked at it, it looks like 25% of us have looked at the study. Maybe how have you used that? And so a second poll should be popping up. And maybe how have you used the data from this study? And if not, if you have, how have you used it? Have you used it to review a report? Okay, so looks like a lot of us plan to use the report. Sorry, my cursor is stuck. Okay. Oops. One moment. Technical difficulties. Okay. So again, the purpose of this study was to describe the condition of education for American Indian and Alaskan Natives. It was conducted under the direction of the National Center for Education Statistics through the National Assessment of Education Progress on behalf of OIE. What's in this study? Well, of course, it has an introduction. It has survey questions that were asked across various states that really look at culture and language, as well as performance standards in both reading and math. And it focuses on 2 grades throughout the study. It's 4th grade and 8th grade. And so here's a look at our study participants. So you can see that they looked at and asked questions in students in public schools, BIE schools, private, and DODEA schools. If you look at the top, you can see here it says grade 4 and grade 8. Again, they really focused this study on these particular grade areas. And you can look at the different survey results, how many actually took the surveys or data was collected from it. If you look at, let me find it here. So I can't really see it here. Let me move forward to another slide. These are the participating states. So it's not all the states across the nation, but these are the particular states. And as you can see by the color coded, throughout the years, they've been adding more and more states. The people who are involved in this study are very conscious about when they make any changes, whether it's small or big, like adding new states, how it will affect the actual results. This is really a longitudinal study. And so they want to make sure that the data they're collecting is very similar so that us, you folks, the users can use and compare the data throughout the years. And so there's always a lot of thought that goes into whether it's adding states or even maybe tweaking just maybe a small little piece of the language. They're very cognizant of how that can change the data and affect how we would use that data. So we're going to go through some data. I pulled out some data and some tables that are really specific to native language because of who we are and how we're joining in. And so we're going to be looking at 3 tables. We're going to be asking some questions for reflection. I'm going to do some orientation to the actual tables. And then I really want to sort of get your feedback on what you see in the data. And we can also have some discussion about, sometimes what you see in the data is what you experience and sometimes it's not. Or maybe there is slight differences. And so we're going to also be having that discussion as well. And really, I think for the talking circle is to really sort of move this data into like, what does this mean for your programs? What are areas that in this talking circle we can work on together to collaboratively address what's being reflected in the data, or maybe what's not being reflected in the data. So let's go and look at this first table. This table is table 18. It looks at the percentage distribution of 4th and 8th grade American Indian and Alaskan Native students who reported on learning about their language by school type in 2019. So this is where I'm going to get into a little bit going through and orienting you around the language of this study. And so if you look at, you can see at this top, on the top row, you see towards the right-hand side, low density public schools and high density public schools. And so what low density public schools means is it has a low population of Alaskan Native or Native Americans, or I'm sorry, yeah, American Indian population.
I have a kind of a question, if you don't mind. Is that fine?
Yeah, go for it.
So in terms of low density public schools, is there a differentiation between, let's say, take a town in Montana, a big town in Montana would be Great Falls, and they have a substantial population of Native students from various tribes. Would that be considered low density public school? So, or also take a school like Hart Butte from our res that probably has maybe 50 people, 99% Indigenous. Is that low density as well?
So low density is defined as a school having less than 25% of all students that were either American Indian or Alaskan Native.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a high density is 25% or more. And so that's, and so really it's just based on the population in the school, not necessarily around the community that's surrounding it. Does that answer your question?
It does, but it kind of leads me to another question.
Yeah.
Like, why was it that percentage? Why was it 25 and not like 50? And I wasn't there when they made the decision, but that does make me just think that. Wonder.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. And like you, I wasn't there, but maybe I can kind of delve into, I don't remember seeing the reasoning behind the 25. Sarah, do you remember seeing anything about that in the study?
Well, I was actually over here scrolling to see because I was like, I'm not sure. And it said the public school categories, low density versus high density, were defined by OIE. So it looks like something that was a governmental definition.
I see. I kind of assumed that it would be kind of like even that's how you include border towns within this high density as well.
Yeah.
And because that makes me think of like a town like our border town, Valier, that I believe would qualify as high density then if we take it at 25%. And they're off the res and they probably just have about 25. Anyways, thank you for answering my question.
No, great question.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I have a feeling, some of it has to do because they're using governmental definitions of low and high density, also keeping it consistent across other reports where they may be looking at what are considered low and high density of other factors for other schools and other reports. So there may be some looking at consistency across that measurement too.
Yeah. Okay, great question. Once you get into the data, they really sort of starts to spur thinking about like why 25%, right? Like what was that, and what was that connected to? There is definitely probably a rationale behind that. So great question. So let's move on. And so as you can see, so we kind of see low density, we now know what that means. High density public schools, we know, and then BIE schools, which I guess most of them assume have large populations of Native American and Alaskan Natives. And so as you can see, the question is, who taught you most of what you know about your language? And so if you look across for fourth graders, you see that they have different categories that the survey participant could actually select from. And then you see the responses as it relates to all students in the first column, low density, high density, and BIE schools. And I was going to get into sort of looking at the data, but I'm going to keep my paws off of that and get and ask you folks some questions about what this data is saying to you. And so really, I guess the question is, what is standing out in the data as you look at this? And you can go ahead and take yourself off of mute and let's have a really great discussion about this. You can also put it in chat. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Well, one thing that comes to mind is, who taught you the most about a language in grade 4, teachers, the low density and the high density. The high density is higher than the low density public schools. And so what you're getting at is, at this high density, that means that you have a high density number of parents and family members who are also within it. And maybe that kind of reflects within those high density schools having Indigenous teachers, or just that school being in a proximity to where there's going to be a high density number of Indigenous students, so that they have you know, we're kind of seeing at least this effort within, I would say, teachers. I don't want to say within schools. I will say within teachers to increase language output. And that's even so for grade 8, it looks like you have a higher jump.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I mean, it's good to see the no one kind of drops. The no one teaches about the language, and that drops very well and
Right.
between the low and high density.
Yeah. So, yeah. So what that's really what you point out there is that, you know, there's larger percentage of students saying in low density public schools saying that no one taught, versus in high density schools. So they're getting
Yeah.
more people teaching them some
So,
language.
maybe you already mentioned this. Were all the people surveyed in this, all the students surveyed, were they all Indigenous, or were they just all people at the selective schools that were surveyed?
All pupils at the selected schools that were surveyed. And that's why I think they make the differentiation between low density and high density.
Yeah.
Now it is only surveying the American Indian Alaska Native students. So it, you know, it's not surveying all students in the school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Okay. That makes sense. Because I was thinking this is kind of a high percentage actually, if it's surveying all.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Yeah, you'll notice any of the ones where it's students reporting, it's just looking at the American Indian Alaska Native students. And then any where they're surveying like staff, administrators, they're surveying everybody.
And BIEs, it would be those I wonder how many BIE schools were surveyed.
Let's see. We have to go back. Let me go back to the map. We could look in those. So it would be any BIE schools in these states, and the number is on. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll say as far as I don't have an exact number, but out of all the fourth graders that they were surveying, 9% were attending BIE schools. So a relatively low percentage out of all of the kiddos being surveyed. And then 8% of the eighth graders. So about the same, 9% of fourth graders and 8% of eighth graders were from BIE schools versus the other low and high density schools.
Oops, sorry. Move forward. Well, I think another interesting piece is again that it's the students are saying that a lot of it's mostly when you look at the percentage, it's family members where they're getting a lot of their language learning from. Do you find that to be the case in your communities?
While y'all are mulling that, I did find the right answer for you, Robert. So it was 100 BIE schools out of the 1,400 schools that they surveyed. And it 1,900 fourth grade kids and 1,600 eighth grade kids. So for a total of 3,500 students from BIE schools.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So does anything, when you're looking at this data, does anything sort of surprise you, or is anything unexpected as far as your sort of day-to-day experience or working in your field around with native languages?
One thing though is that like this takes the plight of all native languages and it all groups them all together, right? And I'm not like trying to say that to discredit this. I mean, it's valuable information to see this because it does give us an idea whole as Indigenous people and language revitalization collectively, and these numbers, and that is, that we need that data.
Yeah.
But we need to dive further too, because eventually each community needs to have their own survey too. Like, well, what was the difference between Alaskan Native communities as opposed to a Montana community on the High Line, as opposed to a community down in the Plateau, as opposed to a community in Oklahoma,
right?
Like state to state. I mean, that would be really interesting to see state to state data. And I didn't see, but is Hawaii included in this?
No.
There are. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And I bet that that data would be very interesting to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, is state to state available within?
No. Unfortunately, I don't know if there may be other studies outside of this that maybe look, and I don't know. I could go ahead and look at it. If I did notice there's really, there are some big sort of data gaps as it relates to native languages across, like the United States. But I think it might be interesting. Maybe there's some data someplace else that looks and compares native language and sort of where they are. But I'm guessing the questions might be different.
I just wanted to chime in. I think that that's a really good point that you made, Robert, is regionally or by state, that's information that would be very helpful. It's so interesting to me to kind of look at this data and kind of think about what it would mean to me. I'm just kind of seeing, where there's, the no one's taught me, that can really be kind of countered by teachers. And that just shows me how much more teachers can have an impact, kind of like what you were saying earlier. And then of course, always that, family members are so important to have involved in language programs, because that seems to be the very biggest impact for everyone. But I also agree that understanding it regionally is so important. For me, where I had a program that I used to manage in Utah, what we were doing up in the Salt Lake City metro area versus what they're doing down in San Juan School District in Navajo country is so different. And so, yeah, I can see how that would, be really great to kind of see what's going on in those regional areas too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. And really helpful to you as you think about your program and where you sort of want to target that data would be helpful. Yeah. Awesome. Anything else stick out in this data to anyone else? Maybe whether it's unexpected or unusual, maybe it's contrary to your experience or right in line with your experience. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, so these are the questions we went over. And so the next table we're looking at is table 19. It's the percentage distribution of 4th and 8th grade American Indian and Alaskan Native students who reported on their language usage at home by school density in 2019. This is a really interesting one. Again, this is about the language use at home. And so you can go ahead, and the question is at the top, how often do members of your family talk to each other in your language. And so think back to that prior, where we saw most of our students getting their language from home. And then take a look at this as it relates to, again, all of the students, the low density public schools, high density, and BIE schools. Oh, sorry. Okay, am I in the right one? Yes. Wait, no. Okay, your language at home. So you can see, again, we're looking at 4th and 8th grade students. And it goes from never or hardly ever all the way to every day or almost every day. And so again, I want to ask maybe you folks to reflect on the same questions. What is really standing out to you in this data?
Well, sorry if I
No, go ahead.
just jumping over, but for me, it's interesting to see that, I mean, it looks like, a little bit more than half of them say that they never or hardly ever do, but it's almost a quarter saying every day or almost every day, which is significant to me. And I think that just kind of reiterates to me, building partnerships with families and, involving multiple members of the family. So making sure that, siblings are, getting the same opportunity so that there's, a more of a chance for dialogue. So to me, that seems like a great actually number there, that we're looking at almost a quarter every day or almost every day. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And you're right. I mean, it does really reflect on the importance of family and the language, that connection between the two.
There's a major statistical difference between BIE schools and public schools.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you look at like even the 4th grade, actually both of them, you look at once or twice a week and every day. I mean, if you look at both of those rows, you see that there's quite a few that are getting at least a language at home, in some form or fashion, in some level of frequency.
Yeah, the frequency between the public schools and the BIE schools, between the two middle statistics, they're pretty similar.
Yeah.
But when you get to the never or hardly and the every day or almost every day, that's where the discrepancy comes in.
Yeah.
Like it's flipped almost.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting, right? I mean, like, what's going on there?
I don't know. One way you can interpret it is that just kind of the impact of the education attempts potentially.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you can see really, like, again, in high density schools, you have more opportunity, or there are probably more students there who are getting language in some form or fashion rather than low density public schools. Anyone else? Is there anything unusual besides the what Robert was sharing about the difference with BIE and public schools? Does this sort of connect to your experience in your realm of native language and in your communities?
Hi, this is Lisa.
Oh,
Here at LCO, Le Coudray, we have a BIE school and there's also a public school, the border town. So I think that parents, make that choice consciously that to send their child, their students to the LCO BIE schools, they know that they're going to have more language and culture support than at the public schools.
yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Anything else? Do you think, how does this, maybe does this, like you, Lisa, what you just shared is sort of uh, the impact of parents making a decision and that being reflected possibly in this data. Do you see any other ways that this data can actually like impact your programs or makes you think about what you're doing in your program?
Yeah, I mean, our school, well, I actually work at the Wadukudading Ojibwe Immersion School, which is a partner with the LCO school. So technically we are considered part of the BIE system, but our curriculum and our medium of instruction is Ojibwe. So it's definitely the parents that are enrolling at our school, it's all language based. They want their kids to be able to speak Ojibwe and be culturally grounded. So I guess I forgot to explain that we're a school within a school, I guess. So
Yeah,
I was speaking on really the BIE K-12 campus that excuse me, I see a lot of the parents that maybe haven't looked at Wadukudading as an option or maybe missed that opportunity when their children were very young.
yeah,
But they also know that the LCO schools has that strong cultural support and some language. So
yeah,
more than the public schools. So I guess
yeah.
we have 3 different choices where I'm from.
And so you are co-located at English predominant school, your
Yep.
campus, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you see that you have maybe at least just your presence there provides some kind of like, I don't know, value to even to the English speaking school that there is this other choice?
Yeah, and it's actually it's a good thing for the community to know and to support, but it's also almost not to be super negative, but it's a bit intimidating too. Like with some of the teachers from the LCO schools, they feel like they can't talk to us because they don't want to break our language initiative, and so that's kind of an awkward situation sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally relate because I actually came from a school that was an immersion school and that actually started in, another predominantly English school. And we were in existence for 30 years. And even, up until a couple years ago, that it still was intimidating to not just teachers, but also the students and to families. You notice that they really like didn't talk when they stepped into our section of the school because they didn't want to break the language piece. But
Yeah.
it also showed that there was this choice out there,
Mhm.
so at least made them a little bit aware of the resources. So I can relate to that experience. Okay, anything else? Anyone else see how maybe, this language at home is affecting. And I know probably a lot of you have programs or efforts to reach out to the family and incorporate the family in language as their students grow in the language. How this may affect how this data either reflects or could affect your program. Okay, let's move on. Another, I think, interesting data piece was this table 20. It looked at the language in school. And so it really looks at the percentage distribution of 4th and 8th grade American Indian and Alaskan Native students who reported on their language usage in school. And so this is really how often do people in your school talk to each other in your language. And so you can look again at all of the students, the low density, high density, and BIE schools. And so if you look at the top again, it goes from never or hardly ever, I guess, hearing people talk in their language or talking in their language, all the way to every day or almost every day. And so when you look at the differences between the different schools in both 4th and 8th grade, is there anything that sort of sticks out to you, or what is the data saying to you? And is that reflective of your daily experience in your programs? I really have a heart for Native languages because of my prior experience. And so it does concern me the amount or the percentage of students across the board who do not have access to the language, even to just hear it, you know? Yeah, it's kind of striking, particularly when students are saying they're getting some kind of language at home. Any thoughts?
I agree with you. I mean, I have a soft spot for native languages, and it needs to be reinforced in the school every day. And I also think this is a lot of it could be aided with multimedia and just that approach. And but it is something that also, I hope this is a reflection of my program, and that's why I would like to see the data.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? I mean, again, when you look at these numbers, and again, this is not the entire United States. We did have on another time, when another talking circle, we did have another program talk about, they were located in California and how California is not on the map for the study, and the number of Native peoples in California, they commented on that. But I think for me still it's a little striking number. And so I'm wondering, Lisa, you were talking about the parents that choose to come to your school because of the language. I'm sure that's the case for a lot of you. Why are they coming? Why are they sending their children to your schools? Why is language acquisition and culture acquisition important to their families? What is the value of learning your native language?
Well, I think for our community, we've had such extreme language loss that we hadn't seen, the last fluent first speaker, they were born in like before World War II. So, the loss was so severe that people were realizing, without that connection, the language connects us to the land and to our practices and our identity. And looking at the kids, struggling to succeed in mainstream schools and even in the BIE school system, I think this was our school was a hope that we would be able to indigenize our curriculum and show everyone and teach the students that they can be successful, that knowing their language and knowing our culture ceremonies, that it would strengthen them as a whole and that they would be successful. But we would have to determine what those, determine the success based on those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? That's great, Lisa.
It's very hard though. It's not easy.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm right there with you. It's like building the plane while you're flying it, right, at the same time. Okay. Well, let's we've kind of, some of you through this discussion have shared your program, and so this is in the study. It shows an Indigenous language learner continuum, and so it really has the different types of programs that are out there. And so there's this non-Indigenous first language only, and what that really means is that it's just a English-speaking educational program. The content, delivery, and environment is only in English. And then if you look at the second one up is non-Indigenous, Indigenous mixed language with non-Indigenous dominant. And so that, one of the best examples I think is when you have like within a school, maybe a language course, you know, that you might be taking in high school or maybe even in intermediate school. So that's that sort of description of that second tier. And then the middle tier, that Indigenous, non-Indigenous bilingual, is where both English language, the dominant language, as well as the native language are being delivered with both in content and in environment. And so it's not just, again, not just content, but it's also maybe, you know, signage, documents, website, that the environment also supports a bilingual approach. And then the level above that is a Indigenous, non-Indigenous mix. And so it sort of flips it, where the Indigenous language is the primary language and the non-Indigenous is sort of the secondary language. And I kind of liken that to the school that I came from, where it was primarily the Indigenous language, but at a particular grade level, we started to incorporate English language learning in the middle 6th grade, actually. And so that's the example that comes to my mind, where you might have an immersion school with English or other languages in the school being taught. And then there is the Indigenous first language only, and that really is where all content areas, including English or Japanese or math or PE, is entirely in the Indigenous language. And so a poll is going to be popping up just to sort of, for you to identify which best describes your program or school. Let's see. Sorry, I can't find the poll. Sarah, do you see it? I can't see it.
I would say my program right now is despite we're still in the second part, the non-Indigenous Indigenous mixed language with non-Indigenous dominant, and we are continuously striving. You know, it would be lovely to try to get, you know, work our way up. Obviously, that's what we want to do. But yeah, that would describe where we're at, the state that we're at, definitely right there.
Okay, awesome. And so is your Robert, is your organization's goal to get to a place where it's bilingual or Indigenous? That's the ultimate?
Well, unfortunately, no, because I work for a public school, and the interesting, we do have one class per grade, however, that the goal is for that.
I see.
But again, that's kind of like, it's an interesting situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I can't find my poll, so I just, if you want to take yourself off mute and just sort of share what your program, what best describes your program.
Our program is Indigenous language dominant, and we do offer a separate English class for our students. We're K-8 right now.
Yeah. And what grade do you have English language all the way through as a separate program, or is there a specific grade that you start to incorporate English or have that course?
We started with the English course starting in kindergarten when we were just a K2 program, but it sort of evolved over the years. And then as we expanded to the middle school, we thought we would just wait until 4th grade, but actually we just decided to add it back. So we are K through 8 with, you know, Indigenous language dominant with an English class per grade.
Interesting. Awesome. There's always sort of, I know in Hawaii, there was always a debate about when to introduce English language into, you know, as not just a form of, but to instruct the English language and around verbs and, you know, all the vocabulary and learning how to read in English. So it's always interesting to hear what other people are doing.
Well, and I'm not sure that Charlene's audio is fully connected, but I can share on her behalf.
Okay, thanks.
So for her program, she's in Albuquerque Public Schools. So theirs would be the non-Indigenous, Indigenous mix with non-Indigenous dominant. She actually teaches Navajo as an elective to both elementary and middle school students.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great example again of that form or where they are in the continuum as an elective.
Yeah. And I think Tom got disconnected, but he is with Yukon Koyukuk School District. Mm-hmm. And theirs is pretty similar to Albuquerque, except that it's an elective, but all the kids participate in the elective. So it's a little less elective. All the kiddos get to participate, and it's at every grade level. And they do it 4 days a week with an instructor who is fluent in the language, and then 1 day a week their primary teacher, which for the most part are English speaking first language teachers, will do lessons with them based on a workbook and some manipulatives and things.
Well, that's cool. So elective but not elective, which is great, right? Because it just
it's an elective in their schedule, but everybody gets the elective.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. So we have a really great range of, you know, programs that are on this continuum. Again, I go back to sort of my experience. There was one school in our community around immersion that I would consider an Indigenous first language only, and that was Navahi. It was really one of the first schools where they teach everything, including English, in Hawaiian language, and these even teach Japanese in Hawaiian language. And so, yeah, I know, pretty interesting. But, you know, that really requires a skill set, a high level skill set in both the native language as well as in English. And, you know, if you're teaching Japanese, although Japanese is a little similar as far as the sounds go to Hawaiian. So awesome. So, you know, again, we're wanting to reflect on the data and what this means for your organization moving forward. And are there any action steps for your individual organizations? And I was really thinking about, you know, this group as we come together monthly, looking at that data around anything that we want to maybe take from that data and think about as a group and really work together as a group that could benefit all. I know, you know, the data was really showing. Some of the points we talked about was around the importance of family in language. We also talked about, looking at like the opportunities of language and the importance of preserving and maintaining a native language. And then we also, just talked about the different like ranges of programs that are providing access to students and their families as related to native languages. And so I really wanted to take some time to sort of throw this out to you folks about how do we sort of take this time every month to maybe take this data and move forward on some maybe action steps or some work that we can do together that will really benefit the entire group, and make these talking circles informative as far as what Jennifer brings to the table around what's happening with OIE, but also maybe some work that you guys want to work on together that will benefit your programs across the board. And so I just sort of want to throw that out. Is there any ideas, again, related to the data and maybe some future work that we can work on based on what the data is telling us? Thoughts, ideas? I'm wondering if beyond preservation and maintenance, which is definitely, very important as it relates to what Lisa was saying about, sort of the the need to preserve the languages because of the maybe the criticalness of the language and the lack of native speakers, or the the critical, not having the critical mass around native speakers. I'm wondering if beyond the preservation and maintenance, is there a larger value, societal value you see that your native languages have for the larger society? And would you be interested in sort of exploring that in this group? Okay, well, I guess not. But again, I just want to sort of throw that out to you. I want to make sure, again, Jennifer provides some really important information around OIE. I'm going to move to that, but I really want to make this time a great time for you folks to talk to each other and maybe do some work together around some maybe shared ideas and projects. So I'm going to move forward. Please, you can go ahead in the chat and provide that. Regarding program updates, if you folks are doing any planning for summer activities, in-person, virtual, or mixed, if you could go ahead and share that in the chat, and even maybe email OIE and let us know what's going on, the TA team. We'd love to sort of see what's happening in your programs, and be able to maybe share this out. And then we're going to move on to some wrap-up slides that Jennifer is going to take us through around budget revisions.
Yes, everybody's favorite topic, right? Budgets. So just thinking about what your plans are. I know that a lot of people have been getting budget revisions into me. Well, there's a few different issues, and I think it might be on the next slide. If you have a large available balance and you have not been doing your drawdowns, it seems like that's kind of gone along with a lot of the questions that people have had. So these are things that I'm looking at right now. I want to make sure that we have a plan in place for getting your funds utilized within the next month, couple months, I guess. And also that you are doing your drawdowns, because I think you know who you are if you have a large available balance. So if there are any questions about something you think you might want to include on a budget, but you just want to run it by me, please reach out to me, let me know. If you're having questions about, you know, we've had a lot of questions about indirect cost. If you have a question about it, don't think you're the only one, because other people have questions about it as well. So, and if you are not sure about what the drawdown status is, please talk to me. Or if there are any reasons or special circumstances why that's the case, it does kind of send us a little bit of a, oh, we need to look into this when things aren't being drawn down and we're this close to the end. So just make sure that if there's anything going on, you're letting me know. Any questions? You can also just definitely let me know privately if you have any questions that you want to get into, or we can set up meetings too, and we can go through things as well. Sorry.
Awesome.
One question I have is, I believe I've been in contact with my finance office, and when I did the report, they at the time they had not done any drawdowns, but since then they have. How can I get you that information?
So I can see when they've done the drawdowns, I can see it immediately. So I just want to make sure that they are happening, because we are kind of coming up to the deadline. And so if there's any reason, with some districts, there have been delays, you know, and so what I want to know is just kind of where we're at with that. So if you have questions about that, or if your finance department, you know, if you want to jump on a meeting with all of us, we can certainly do that if they have questions or if they're confused about anything too. Okay.
Thanks, Jennifer. So now I just want to, we're a little bit over. We have some events coming up. You should have received the email, True Colors. Again, this is limited space, so you do want to register now. It's a really great training to both get to know yourself as well as your team in order to create a real cohesive team. So I really want to encourage you to do that. And then we have some upcoming events. Again, our next Talking Circle will be on July 22nd, and then the OIE office hours are on July 29th, and the same time. You should have received the end of the event poll, should be in progress. I see some of you folks completing that, thank you. And then we've done some questions and the poll, and then just sort of wrapping up. If you have any questions, contact Jennifer from OIE, or if you have any questions of the OIE technical assistance team, there's our email. Please be sure that you include your PR number so that we know which grant you are referring to and can get the questions or the answers appropriate to the grant. Again, thank you guys for your input and your talking in the Talking Circle. I really appreciate that, and we'll try to pull together and come up with a plan that is both relevant and meaningful for the next Talking Circle. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.